Jersey. Ms. Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. General Cavoli, you said in your opening statement that Russia is in the process of significantly rebuilding its military by recruiting more soldiers, building more vehicles, and creating more munitions than we've seen before. So if the war in Ukraine were to end today, do you believe that the Russian military would continue to represent a significant threat to the U.S., Ukraine, and our European allies in the coming years?
Yes, ma'am. It would take them a little bit of time to reorient their conventional force and reposition it, but not that much time. And then they could pose a conventional threat. Very important for me to add, however, that they have never stopped having their strategic capabilities, their nuclear submarines, their long-range aviation, their cyber, their space, all of that is alive and well and largely unaffected by the war in Ukraine.
Thank you. And if Russia was able to retain and control significant portions of Ukrainian territory once the war ends, do you believe Russia would consider that a victory and consider launching a similar invasion of Ukraine or another European country in the future?
It's hard for me to predict the future, ma'am, but I think it's very safe for all of us to say that wouldn't prevent them from doing it in the future. It would certainly leave the door open for them. Yeah.
Thank you. And as the Trump administration chooses to abandon Ukraine and let Russia rebuild its military, they're also considering cutting the U.S. military presence in Europe. So, General Cavoli, how would cutting U.S. forces from EUCOM impact your ability to respond to a crisis or potential conflict with Russia?
Ma'am, it would increase the amount of time it took to respond. It depends, of course, on what forces were hypothetically to be removed. It depends on what kind of action were required to counter Russia. But clearly, moving things to the other side of the Atlantic increases the time-space challenge. Other than that, I don't want to be evasive, but it's really a very situation-dependent question.
And would removing, I guess, to be more clear, our brigade combat team from Poland or having our forces stationed in Germany or Italy slow your response to a Russian assault on our Eastern European allies?
Yes, I've consistently testified to that.
Thank you. So as we move forward, can you just talk a little bit, too, as you mentioned, about what you think the key strategic aspects are of Russia's military?
So in the broadest sense, ma'am?
That provide the biggest threat to the United States?
Yeah, their nuclear arsenal.
What about their cyber capabilities?
I believe their nuclear arsenal poses a bigger threat. Mm-hmm. Their cyber capabilities are more likely to be used, but in most cases wouldn't have the catastrophic effect that the nuclear threat would have. But of course, that again depends on what nuclear weapons we're talking about, what cyber attacks. But in general, I would say the nuclear capabilities, and then I would say the space and cyber, sort of on a level. But conventionally, their strategic advantage continues to be mass, that they can put in direct proximity to NATO forces that challenges us to respond in time across the spaces required. So basically, they can put a force into place that would cause us to have to react in a timely fashion. And that time-space problem is really the essence of conventional deterrence on the continent.
And given the recent conflict in Ukraine, what has been what will be the hardest for Russia to rebuild in the aftermath of that?
I'd like to answer that in closed session because it goes into some technical stuff. What I can say is I don't think it's that hard to rebuild their mass. They have manpower available. They demonstrate the willingness to conscript it, and it doesn't take that long to reconstitute the size of their old force or even to increase it. They still have equipment and storage that they could pull out and renovate, and they have increased their ability to produce legacy hardware tanks and armored personnel carriers and things like that. So there are some things that are easy. The things that are hard, it'd be better to answer in closed session, ma'am.
Thank you, and I yield back.